How y'all doing? For this review, I'm going to cover a book I became aware of a while back, and I started looking into acquiring it and reading it through first through a YouTube channel and then through the tabletop role-playing game Black Sword Hack Ultimate Chaos Edition. Now, as I said before in other previous reviews here, this has an appendix into it of suggested reading material. This is a tabletop role-playing game from the Mary Mushroom, and the idea of this, if you like playing tabletop role-playing games based on the old-fashioned sword and sorcery stuff like Conan, Fafhrd Grey Mouser, Kane, all that, Elric, that dark, 60s, 70s paper, sword and sorcery, this is the game for you. But of course, this has a appendix of suggested reads, like of course, of all the ones I mentioned. Also, The Black Company by Glenn Cook. I did ROM now, but this one we're going to go through Nifft the Lean. The other channel where I first became aware of this before I decided to get it through this book was All Fiction is Fantasy, a YouTube channel which is a offshoot of the Dungeon Dive. And Dungeon Dive, he covers games where in his attempt with All Fiction is Fantasy, he covers just the books that he reads. It hasn't gained as much views on it, but I'll link down below the video and talk about where it gives a nice little lengthy discussion. Here I'll give a short review and we'll talk about it. The book has 4 stories involving Nifft's life as a thief through various adventures. It's bookended, so to speak, by a scribe writing him down, given to him secondhand by friends, and companions, who knew him in life and were of these adventures in particular. There might be some unreliable narrator on this, but I wouldn't get too much into that. The books are rich enough as it is. All right, so the first story. Come then, mortal, we will seek her soul. Nifft and his companion at the time, how they're arresting it, in a campsite, they're a little unsafe area, but then a huge boulder rises, and it opens up, and out through it came these bones, and then the bones started gaining flesh in a very grotesque way. If for any of you who watched the first Hellraiser movie, you probably know the scene I'm talking about, where a big puddle starts, a skeleton pops out of the floor and it starts gaining flesh a little bit. It's like that, but much more complete. Doesn't have to kill anybody. It starts to flesh itself out and it becomes a very beautiful woman. In fact, Nifft's companion is quite enamored with her. Her name is Dalasim. And what it is, she's hiring them to bring back a former lover of hers who promised himself to her, and when she but basically just walked out of her when she needed him the most. So now she's dead in the underworld, and she's hiring these two to kidnap him and bring him to the underworld to her. So that's their story about trying to kidnap him, and then following the steps to try and meet up with death, and how he has to have death lead him to Dalasim, and they go through the gates with the folk on their side, and what the price they have to pay for each gate in order to come back. This cover by the great Michael Whelan, who unfortunately retired from fantasy art, but that's a long discussion about that. It shows these 2 mummies at this gate here. There's a price that's got to be paid at each gate, but this is one of those cases where a good cover definitely guides you on what's in the context of the book. And so what's in it for them? Well, she's promising them a key to a wizard's mansion that will hold great treasure. And the question is, will she keep on her promise there? Is there another ulterior motive when they bring the folk to her? You'll find out when you read it. The next story is The Pearls of the Vampire Queen. Nifft, with a different companion named Bernard, they're going out in these swamps there, which has these polyps that carry these, that they collect these pearls from. A very risky endeavor because it requires diving. The polyps are very, can easily defend themselves if those who are not paying attention. They've been at this for a little bit, but then they get word about the Vampire Queen, who lives in this giant pyramid out in a lake in the middle of these swamps. So, and there's a special ritual that she goes through involving her new husband, that talks about all that. So they make an elaborate plan to, during this ritual, go in and try to steal the treasures from this Vampire Queen. And how successful will they be? Will they get anything at all? Will they be chased down? Well, I'll let you read that one, but on to the next story. The next story is The Fishing of the Demon Sea. This is the longest of the 4 stories in this book. It's also the most visually impressive when you delve into the world that they're traveling in here. Nifft and Bernard are held about to be publicly executed. And after giving some very interesting last words of Nifft of what he thinks of the Lord that's putting him to death, the Lord spares the two because he's going to hire them to rescue his son, Wimford, who was captured by a demon from the demon sea. Now, Wimford, the son, is a very impatient, spoiled, stubborn, and incompetent. He wants to learn magic, but in his of his temperaments here, he tried to acquire the Sasmazan from the demon world. He's trying to gain a special elixir from there. Unfortunately, he doesn't quite do it right, and the demons take him into the demon sea. So now Nifft and his companion are taken to a cavern, which deep into the cavern leads further down and into the demon world. And you're given a long stretch of where traveling downward to the sea itself, and the sea is I think it's just one of the most visually impressive stories. It does have some slow spots here, but eventually when you go underground and when you open up this vast expanse of an ocean with its own light that looks like there's a sun underneath that and its own clouds of everything, jewels everywhere. But there's also some interesting demons that have to go through this sea. They find a companion of very interesting abilities, and gives them some supplies and helps them on a ship where they find a demon that captures Wimford. So that's what. And when they capture him, will the Lord keep his word? How would they try to escape if they were backstabbed? But I won't spoil that. Now we get to the last story. I gotta admit, after a few months of after reading this book and trying to think back at the stories, this last one didn't stick to my mind as much. I have to look online to get a synopsis of that. That is The Goddess in Glass. This is where Nifft is simply helping a mining town to save itself from collapsing, and dealing with these giant rock-eating grubs, an ancient dead goddess. And I'll leave it at that. So yeah, Nifft the Lean is a pretty good book. It came out in '82, and it's a nice little addition to the sword and sorcery and heroic fantasy stuff at the time. You're given a thief, which you don't read too much about. Sure, there's Fafhrd, Grey Mouse, and others, but mostly it's always the fighters, barbarian types, and all that. And it's good to have more thief stories about this. And this is not just simply raiding a house. I'm sure he does that. It's just more elaborate plots, exotic treasures, and and all that. So this book really does that. Now, it's got some slow parts. I won't lie about that. You can read online to people complain about this. But that's not the problem. It's trying to find an affordable copy of this. I was fortunate. I got this along with a book sale on eBay, which I guess the seller was just trying to get rid of whatever they can at whatever the price. So along with this book came a stack of these books. It's got Wizard War, we got the Forest and the Dirge, Royals and Rogues. I don't think that's fantasy. I think it's more of a elaborate mystery or thriller. The Rainbow Sword, Mist, the a book of novelization of the famous computer game. Robert A. Heinlein's Job, The Unicorn Dancer, Isaac Asimov's Magical Worlds of Fantasy, #1, Wizards. Some of these I'm going to probably keep. The rest I'll just donate to the local bookstore. But with this and Nifft the Lean, total was around 20 some odd bucks, and I figured, and quickly, without having to go through eBay, even when you include shipping, this was just below $3. You go on eBay and look for this, and you're at the lowest end $70, and that's for a similar worn out paperback, not in mint condition, mind you. Just a simple, a worn paperback, some in worse condition than this, they're going to sell it for at least $70. And some of them are now going from over $100 to $200 and $300 for this paperback. And a couple are variant paperbacks with different covers on it. It's ridiculous. So if you can find a way to negotiate it to a more affordable price, $20 to $50, whatever your comfortable price range is, I figure if more people starts making offers like that, someone's going to get a better deal than this. There's no reason this book should be, that's hundreds of dollars just because it's out of print. I mean, if you figure it's something that's this much in demand, where that price is in demand, they could republish the book have a Kindle version. Carly Wagner's Cane's got some of the problem. At least there's Kindle versions that are just a few bucks each, so you can read them today if you don't mind reading in an electronic format. And I'm even more luckier than that, because outside of this, at the local used bookstore here in town, I found another copy. See, for $3.50. So these two copies, which will run hundreds of dollars at a secondhand store, mostly on eBay where I can have you, I got them for just below $6 together. I'm lucky on this one. That's why I grabbed a second copy. I took advantage of this. And if this is such a cherished story in the genre, and people may be interested in reading it, why are they doing this? I mean, come on. This is just ridiculous that used book sellers are taking these old paperbacks and running them high end just simply because out of print. Lower the prices of it. You know, it's not like they're the Centipede Press, which does have their own edition, Nifft the Lean. That is already naturally a high dollar item to begin with because they're limited runs and they're fully illustrated, high quality books. So of course they're going to be slightly higher, in the secondhand market. But the regular paperback, which was probably probably $5 at best at the time this came out, shouldn't be that $1,000. I mean, okay, if it's out of print, $20 at best. It's a little high, but okay, they obviously didn't, unless that buyer bought it from another seller at a high price. They're gypping themselves and they're destroying. All you're doing is just trying to see who could pay more down the line. It's ridiculous. But if there's someone out there that has a copy of this and turn it into a quick digital format in some way, or if there's a cheap copy of it, get what you can, negotiate what you can, because I should not be this lucky. Anyone who wants to read this should be should readily afford this. And it's a good story. And since I spoke about or fiction is fantasy, he has a nice hour and a half where he goes more in depth in the stories than I did. So if you're interested in that, or if you've already want someone's opinion of the depths of this, I'll link it down below in the description. With that said, Nifft the Lean by Michael Shea. Got my 2 copies. I hope you get lucky with finding yours. And it's a good one of the Sword and Sorcery vein. Thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.